Good morning, everybody. Can you all hear me? Hi. Hope everyone had some great rest last night. It's a pleasure to welcome you again to our second Cities Connecting Children to Nature Leadership Academy. We had a really hands-on start to the academy yesterday. Unfortunately, we didn't get to paddle, but we did have a wonderful hike. About 20 of us managed to go on a wonderful hike with some local students with Wilderness Inquiry at Fort Snelling State Park. We were able to usher in the first snowfall of the season. That felt special. And had some really thought-provoking words from Richard Louv last evening, and also some very energizing introductions from all of you to the work that you're doing. And so we're just really excited to launch into the core of our Leadership Academy today. And to help us do that, I'm pleased to welcome Sarah Milligan-Toffler, Executive Director of the Children and Nature Network.
Thanks, Priya. Well, good morning, everyone. That was good. You've had your coffee. Awesome. As Priya said, we did have a wonderful day yesterday, and I just really want to thank everyone for sharing your great stories and what you're doing and your commitment to this issue. We're really excited to be working with you here over the next couple of days on how we can increase nature connections in cities. My job here this morning is to introduce Mayor Coleman, which, he's already been introduced twice, so I guess they just kind of needed to stick me into the schedule somewhere to do something. So he really doesn't need an introduction. You've already heard, he's a Clapton fan, right? And he really is passionate about this issue of connecting kids to nature, and it is really his leadership that has helped make this project possible. I was thinking about, Rich, what you said last night about this issue being something that cuts across political lines. And I think that's really true. I think it does. But my friend and colleague Greg Lace wrote a blog that you can find on our website where he indicates that this is an issue that often, also it's an issue that doesn't rise to the top of the priority list very often. So that's a challenge for us as a group, I think. How do we elevate the discussion of this issue and make it a priority in our city? So I hope that's something that you all will be thinking about here over the next couple of days. And there are a couple of things that Mayor Coleman has done that I hope you all will kind of take a page out of his book. First of all, he has really used the power of convening and the power of his office to convene unlikely partners, including the Children and Nature Network and the National League of Cities. Not obvious partners, right? But here we all are. So that's great. The second thing he's done is he's connected this issue to other priority issues in the city. So education, health, city vitality. So I hope you all think about that, like how can nature help you achieve other goals that you have in your city and to elevate the discussion, okay? I know we heard last night you all are working with great mayors, doing great things, but I will just say in my humble and totally unbiased opinion, we have the best mayor right here in St. Paul, Minnesota. Please join me in welcoming Mayor Chris Coleman.
That's very nice of you. Thank you, Sarah. That's really kind of you. So early in the morning, it's great to have such nice words being said. It's great to have an opportunity to talk to you all. I'm just going to give you a moment of nature. Let's see where it goes. It's there somewhere. So the other day I was out on a bike ride and was finishing. The problem is I live on the west side of the city of St. Paul. And the west side is actually the south part of the city. Those of you that understand rivers know why the west side becomes the south side or the south side becomes the west side. But I live up on a bluff, and I have the great fortune of walking out of my house every day and seeing the Mississippi River, which is a little bit, Rich talked a little bit last night about having that special place, and for me it's just walking out my front door on a fairly regular basis. But as I was coming along the river, this trail, this picture is less than a mile away from where we sit as the crow flies. But I knew two things. One is these days were fleeting, as was evidenced by the snow flying yesterday. And two, that I had a hell of a long climb to get back up to my house, to go up this bluff. And so I did just pause for just a second to just take a little bit of this in. And that is in a metropolitan area with 3.5 million people surrounding it, that we take for granted, that we don't think a lot about sometimes. And so I'm just going to leave that picture up there, and if you get bored with me, you can just go to your happy place. Think of it as the CBS Sunday morning moment of nature, and you can just look at that. So, first of all, I'm so grateful for the Children in Nature Network and the JPB Foundation for your support of this effort. The National League of Cities that I am the immediate past president of is an organization that really has leapt into this issue, really helped us understand this. It helped that the current president last year, me, and the incoming president, Ralph Becker from Salt Lake City, are absolute outdoor enthusiasts, nuts. Our wives are both, crazy. I was telling the story last night about, Connie and I really kind of connected over the boundary waters. I was telling you, that we actually, you proposed to your wife in Glacier. Connie and I, she met me like 3 weeks before the bar exam. Again, as I said, terrible time to meet anybody. But after the bar exam, we went out to Glacier for a few days, and we were hitchhiking over going to the Sun Road. We got picked up by a pickup truck and didn't get in the cab. We got thrown in the back of the bed of the truck, and there was this gigantic 55-gallon drum with skull and crossbones and all kinds of things. So she had no choice but to cuddle with me to get away from the hazardous waste. And so going across, going to the Sun Road in the back of a pickup truck. So it's not just about what it does for children, it's pretty good for adults too, this nature stuff. And we kind of like that. But Ralph's commitment to this issue, I think, is really embedding this relationship between the National League of Cities and helping us develop this network of cities. And it's not that we're creating initiatives in cities so much as kind of help uniting them, figuring out how we learn from each other, stealing ideas from each other. That's an old mayoral tradition, is to steal from other cities and just call it your own idea. Providence, your out-of-school time network was absolutely inspiration for everything that we're doing on our out-of-school time programming. So many different, just so many different connections between our cities. From you folks from Pittsburgh, I hope you get around, because I've actually not spent a ton of time in Pittsburgh, but everybody that I've talked to says that the St. Paul and Pittsburgh are a lot alike, kind of have that same blue-collar work ethic and ethos. Who's the great poet, or the great playwright? August Wilson, thank you very much. August Wilson spent about half of his time in Pittsburgh and half of his time in St. Paul before he finally moved out to Seattle. So, there's all these connections on some of our cities. I could go around Grand Rapids, and I love all your cities. So it's the fun part about being president of the National League of Cities, is you really do get to go out and know other towns and see what other people are doing. And so we take a lot from this. I wish I had an hour to speak. I don't. If I had an hour to speak, I'd probably have 15 minutes worth of things to say. Somewhere in all of those nuggets, we'd come up with 15 minutes worth of interesting tidbits. But I just want to talk a little bit about, first of all, some of the things that we're doing in the city of St. Paul, but also talk a little bit about why it's important to me. This is, as Sarah said, this is connecting so many different pieces of this. And I was trying to draw an analogy just based on things that I dealt with over the last couple of weeks. I dealt with parking meters on a very popular commercial strip where I got 2.5 hours of really angry people screaming at me. That was, not the most pleasant 2.5 hours of my life. And then the next night I was over on the east side of the city of St. Paul dealing with a community forum because there had been 3 murders in a very short span of time on the east side. And so much of the work that we're doing, it's like, well, how do you connect, a forum on violence, a forum on parking meters, and what we're doing here, trying to connect kids to nature. And I think that they do have a connection in a weird way, and I'm not sure that I have a really straight line to make that connection. But the fact of the matter is, connecting our kids to nature is somewhat about empowering them. to help our communities that are, our poor communities, our communities of color, to give them the confidence so that they can find their voice, so that they can lift up their voice and be a part of the community dialogue, so that they have the same sense of ability that the wealthier community that was protesting parking meters, the wealthy white community that has no trouble expressing their voice, that if we can empower our kids of color, our low-income kids in the same way, that they have the confidence, that they have the ability to address their concerns, then the parking meter conversation would have taken a lot less importance on the front page of the newspaper, and the conversation around violence on the east side in a low-income neighborhood would have had a lot more prominence in the paper. But too often, our kids are isolated, our families are isolated, and they don't feel like they're part of a bigger whole. They feel like they're part of a really small world. And I was trying to think about this. I was so inspired by the picture from St. Paul. If you saw the kids, looking at the small organisms in the pond, that there's some, again, not a very linear thread, but our kids live in a very small world. And they need to understand how they connect to a much bigger world. And if they connect to the much bigger world by seeing how small sometimes pieces of the world can be and how they relate to those very small pieces, that would be a pretty cool thing if they could understand that. A child living in an inner city neighborhood might be 6 blocks away from that, but they may never see that. They may never connect to that. They may never understand that that's even there, or even why they would care about that. But if we can get those kids to understand that their world is bigger and that they're a part of that bigger world, if they understand that they play a role in that, it is absolutely so empowering, so emboldening, that it is just the most amazing, wonderful thing to see. We have done a lot of different things, but one of my favorite programs, Mike Hom is here with our Parks department, and we started a program with Greg and Wilderness Inquiry, the National Park Service, where we sent kids out to Glacier National Park. And that sprung out of a lot of different things, not only my experiences working in Glacier, but it also was the Ken Burns series on the national parks, where one of the things that was said during the course of that whole discussion around Ken Burns' series on the national parks was that our kids of color, our families of color, are not accessing our national parks. That 20 million people of color live live within 4 hours of Yosemite and will never see it. That in St. Paul, Ann Hunt, who is my environmental policy director, she and I worked in Glacier as college students. She at St. Mary's, me at East. That is kind of like a St. Paul thing. If you went out to Glacier National Park, at least for a long time, it's changed a little bit, but half the kids working in Glacier would have been from St. Paul because of the connection to the Great Northern Railroad. It's like a quintessential St. Paul experience, having a chance to work in the national parks, but it was a quintessential white St. Paul experience. It wasn't a quintessential African-American St. Paul experience or a Latino experience. And so one of the things I was hoping to do was to kind of kickstart kids that realizing that these are great summer jobs, waiting on tables or, working in laundry sucked, there were good jobs, but the fact of the matter is you're in the national parks. And so we started this program, sending kids out there, knowing the connections and reading Rich's, things on the nature deficit disorder and all of those, connecting those pieces. And you would talk to these kids after they came back. And it was like they had just completed their degree at Harvard. The way that they felt about themselves, the way they talked about themselves and their experiences was really, it was changing. And so my favorite story to tell about that was walking along the Highline Trail one day with this group of kids. And for those of you that have ever hiked on the Highline Trail, the first, probably half a mile or more is along this very sheer cliff face where you have to hold on to a wire on one hand and you look down about 400 feet on the other. And as I was following this one young man, he literally was shrinking with every step that he took, getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And got to the end of this section and he sat down and I said, "Can I get a picture of you?" And he said, No, I don't want, I'm crying. And I said, "What's going on? Can I help you?" And he said, "I'm so afraid of heights. I am so deathly afraid of heights that I can't take it." He said, "But the real reason I'm crying is I am so excited to be here." I am so happy that I have an opportunity to see, and this is just amazing. He couldn't believe that he was there. So we went out a couple of hours, came back over the same stretch, and by the time we traversed back to this last stretch of the trail, he was skipping, hiking, drinking water, eating food, doing everything except for holding onto the wire, and we had to remind him, hold on to the wire. But it was transformed. He was transformed in just a couple of hours of experience. Now that, do I sit here and say that his life will forever be changed because of that 2-hour experience? No, but at least he's got a seed that has been planted that allows him to come back to that at some point in his life, or maybe helps draw him back out to the wilderness at some point so he can get refueled for other things. Or maybe he starts to understand that nature is not just something that happens in Glacier National Park, but could happen here in downtown St. Paul, and he could refuel from that. Our kids are terrified of the wilderness. This is the scariest thing that they could ever imagine. We have kids that hear shots being fired outside of their house on a regular basis, but you take them down into this park to camp overnight, and they're convinced they're going to be eaten by bears. Now, we do have a couple of coyotes. I don't think we have any bears. I haven't seen any bears. We have some wild turkeys which can get kind of aggressive, but I think for the most part the kids are safe down here. But this is scary for them. But when they conquer that fear, when all of a sudden they wake up in the morning and they're still alive, and they crawl out of a tent, and they realize that they have done something that not only did they not imagine themselves doing, but now get to brag to their friends that they've done it, and they get to be the cool kids on the block. That's a really emboldening, empowering thing for our children to be able to do. We dragged our kids out hiking all the time. We would almost annually take a summer trip out to one of the national parks or the Wind Rivers or something, and we do a multi-day hike. And invariably, my daughter would have blisters within about 15. I mean, honest to God, I don't think the car door had been locked before she had blisters on her feet. So, it was 3 days of just misery and awfulness and complaining. And I remember one time we were in the Missions, and we came out after 4 days, and there's this beautiful dam, this cool water, and just perfectly clear. And I said, "Come on, Molly, let's jump in." She goes, "No, I'm going to go sit in the car." 13-year-olds, they're lovely. And I said, "Molly, I'm not trying to kill you here." And she goes, "Well, you could have fooled me." This is now the same young woman who just graduated from the University of Wisconsin, who took a 6-week camping trip with her boyfriend from Chicago, and she was the expert, right? She was the one that knew how to do it. She knew how to set up the tent. She knew where to go. She had all these things mapped out. And so, it's not that she was living a deprived life or she didn't have some of the advantages that come, disadvantages coming being the mayor's daughter, but advantages too. But all of a sudden she was the expert in a subject matter that she was really confident of, even though there was never any expression of liking this at all while we were doing it. I think a lot about when we were raising our kids. One of the analogies, and I was thinking about this, Richard, when you were speaking last night. One of the analogies that we really used was that of a child playing tag. And when kids first start playing tag, and tree is safe, or whatever you call it, but the tree is, if you're on the tree, you're fine. Kids start off playing tag by grabbing onto that tree, and they just hold on to it, and they won't let go. And then as they get emboldened a little bit, they kind of go like that. And then they're maybe 5 feet away from it. But eventually, as long as they know that tree is there, they're empowered. And as long as they understand that there's a path back to that tree, they're empowered. And the more secure they are in knowing that tree is there, the more secure they are in being able to explore the rest of the world. And I think that that's true when you talk about your special place in nature. When you know that that's there, when you know that you can go back to it and it's there, I think it gives you incredible confidence to conquer. Now my daughter's living in New York. She had a bad day in New York yesterday. She broke her cell phone and all those things, and commutes for an hour and a half to get to her school in the Bronx. But still, I think that there's just a confidence that came from all of those things, knowing that there's a tree. Unfortunately, right now the tree is mom and dad's credit card, but eventually that will change as well. So one of the things that we're trying to do in St. Paul is create not just opportunities to take kids out to Glacier, but to bring kids down to the river, to have them go on the urban canoe, having the urban canoe experience and coming down on this river in the Wilderness Inquiry boats. It's an amazing thing to watch those kids step into that canoe for the first time. Again, frightened out of their mind. And a couple of hours later, or even an hour later, step out of that canoe with such confidence that they did something that they couldn't imagine that they were doing. And it's incredible to see that happen, and it happens on a daily basis. And we need to continue to provide those opportunities in our own communities, whether it's planting a rain garden or whether it is just walking through the woods. All of these things matter. It is another thing that we're doing was just the brainchild of a couple of four individuals, two couples, having dinner one night in one of our poorest and least green areas of town. There was an old Amherst Wilder Foundation, which is an incredible partner with us on so many different fronts, had this gigantic campus that they were vacating. They were going to move over to the corner of the busy intersection with light rail line connected to it and all that. And the question was, what do you do with this gigantic parcel that was the former home of the foundation? And the natural tendency was, well, we'll build houses there, we'll try to create a commercial strip, or we'll do these things. But these four individuals sat around a dinner one night and they said, this neighborhood needs green space. This neighborhood needs a place for our kids to go, because there isn't a place that they can walk to or even bike to other than a playground that has any kind of natural asset. And so out of that dinner conversation was born Frogtown Farms, with support from the Trust for Public Lands. Paige is here. Thank you, Paige, for your support. And an incredible, we had the opening this fall of Frogtown Farms. And as I talked about it that day, this is one of the most amazing gifts that we have given to our future generations of children, who now have a touchstone that allows them to be outside, and they can plant, or they can just walk through the woods, or they can just have a moment to, as you described, sit on the hill and look at the clouds. That wasn't there before. That did not exist. And now it exists for one of our poorest neighborhoods, one of our most diverse neighborhoods. And I think it's going to change a lot of how people feel about themselves, and wash away some of those challenges that our families have. So much of this is just, it's making those connections. It's saying that this isn't just something that we do over there. It is something that has to be embedded in everything that we do. So one of the things that we stole from another city was Seattle's diversity work. You heard last night about the incorporation of diversity plans into every department. We have the same mandate to incorporate diversity into, and it's how we think differently about how we look at the challenges that we have, what white privilege looks like, but also how do we make sure that when we're setting policies in place, that we're really cognizant of the different impacts on different communities and whether or not all voices are being heard, et cetera. And I think the same thing, embeds itself when we talk about the social emotional learning component. Like, my wife and I were talking last night that we have mentoring programs and tutoring programs. And I think it's incredible that people are willing to volunteer and to help our children read or do math and those things. But how much better would that be? And there is a program called Boulder Options that incorporates the physical with the mental, so that it isn't just a person popping in, here's how to read, here's how to do this math program. It's working on that social emotional skill set. And as my wife said, maybe we could incorporate, I'll do reading one day, and we'll take our dog for a walk through this park on another day. And wouldn't that be a more complete way to help empower our kids and teach them? Because it gives them something. Just having people drill more drills for them is not necessarily the way that ultimately they're going to be successful. They might learn that drill, but will it stay with them? Will it embolden them to think that they can go to college? Will it help them understand that there's a bigger life for them? I think connecting them to wilderness and outdoor experiences matter. I think in my own experience, and I talk a lot about going to Outward Bound when I was, after I graduated from high school, but I was really cognizant of the fact, and I hadn't thought about this for years, that ultimately my passion for woods and for nature started because my jerky brother, when I was 12 years old, convinced my dad to sell our ski boat and get a canoe, which I thought was the worst thing that ever happened to me. I mean, this you don't understand, this destroyed my life. This was my one chance to be cool. I was just about to be able to drive that boat and to take my friends skiing, and it was gone. And I had a canoe. And it's like, I can't ski behind a canoe. But all of a sudden we were out, on the lake and canoeing. And then he did something I never believed we could, in Minnesota you have cabins. Everybody has a cabin. And it's kind of a funny aside. If you're moving into Minnesota from outside, everybody will say, Minnesotans will give you directions anywhere but their own home. We're very friendly people. The challenge is we don't have time for you. So if you've just moved in here, I would love to have you over for dinner on Friday, but I'm up at the cabin. So if you're not at the cabin next to me, I'm not going to see you. I'm not going to talk to you because that is like the flood of cars going out every weekend. But we had a cabin not too far from St. Paul. But these woods behind us were just these vast, mysterious things. And one day my brother said, "Let's go out for a walk in the woods." And I went, "Well, why? What I just don't understand that." And there we were, exploring, and he makes stuff up because he's that kind of a brother, and he would say, "Well, those are Indian burial mounds." I don't think that they were, but just that all of a sudden in the imagination of a 12 or a 13-year-old kid, it's like, wow, holy cow, that's incredible. And then it encouraged me to start exploring those things. So it's just that, it doesn't take a lot to spark that interest in lifelong commitment and devotion to wilderness because it continues to regenerate and refuel our kids as they face life stresses. As a matter of fact, I have one event that I got to wear a tie for. This was not it. I figured if I showed up in a sweater, you guys would be fine. But the minute this tie comes off, I still have my dock and my boat in the water, so I got to go up to my cabin this afternoon. I've been looking forward to this for like 2 weeks. That at 3:30 this afternoon, I'm going to be in a car because for 36 hours, I will have an opportunity to be in the woods, on the lake, and all of the pressures of parking meter hearings and challenges that we face in our community will just be gone for a while, and I'll be renewed and restored. The gift that you're giving to the children in your community by connecting them to these opportunities, by helping them understand that nature is not something that happens somewhere else, that expands their world exponentially, is the key to expanding their own potential and helping ultimately make those children successful. I know of no better way to help our kids believe in themselves than the work that you're doing to show that you believe in them and that they're part of a bigger whole. Thank you for being a part of this. It matters.
Thank you so much, Mayor Coleman. Mayor Coleman is going to stay with us a little bit this morning, but does anybody have burning questions you'd like to ask about how you can export his fine leadership to your city or other topics?
How can we clone?
Yeah. Are you engaged in a cloning experiment? Yeah. I'd be very surprised if there were no questions based on what the provocations Mayor Coleman offered. Rich Lou has a question.
What are the 5 top things that you would tell another mayor about this issue? This or her with?
Richard asked, what are the 5 things I would tell another mayor? I would start by saying if you're not engaged in this work, you're not engaged in the business of making a difference. It sounds preachy, but for years there was kind of this discussion around whether mayors should get involved in education. And the classic, conversation was, well, I don't control the school board. I don't have control over the budgets of the schools. Why how can I get involved in education? But the first thing, so I kept on saying, if you're not involved in education, you're not involved in the future success of your community. You're not involved in the future economic vitality of your community. But then the question is, what is the role? So if you want to get involved in education, this is one of the best ways that you can get involved in education, because you're not telling an independent school board what they have to do. You're saying, here's what I can do to support you. And if I can connect a child to nature, and they can gain social emotional skill sets, grit, determination, resiliency, all of those things, because of that, that is the clearest and most direct way that they can get engaged. So I'm terrible at giving. You asked for 5. If you asked for 2, I wouldn't be able to give you 2, because they all kind of roll into each other. But it's one of the things, one of the pieces, and there will be a connection back to this, but one of the reasons why I started this program, sending kids out to Glacier, was thinking about the demographics and realizing that by 2050, at the very least, we're going to have a majority-minority culture. And if our kids of color are not going out to Glacier or out to the Tetons or whatever, who's going to be there to support them? Those national parks, we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of the National Park Service. Who's going to be there standing up for the national parks on their 200th anniversary if our kids of color are not experiencing the national parks? And so I think the same thing is true, and we heard some examples last night where people are talking about, I think St. Petersburg was talking about, engaging kids so that the work that was done to clean up the bay and the waterway, that there's not another generation of kids that don't care about it and is going to destroy it. So if you care about environmental issues, get kids involved in a micro level, and then they will care about the macro level. Would be another. I'm sure there's more pieces of it, but I just think that if you break down challenges of violence, why are kids participating in gangs? Because that's, quite frankly, the only option that gets presented to a lot of our children. You told the story of our friend who disappears every time you talk about him. Where'd he go? He's gone. It was Juan gone. See, there you go. But present kids. Kids will make the right choice if they're given a valid choice. So if you want to start engaging them in a more positive direction, give them ownership of the local stream near their house. Give them ownership of the local woods near their house, and get them invested in it, because right now they don't feel like they're invested in anything, and that's a critical piece of it. So I don't know that that's any number, but.
Steve, do you see any connection? Because in my city, the neighborhood that you're talking about there, and I'm sure we all have them, there's low rates of home ownership. So I think the kids don't care as much. And in my view, they don't care as much about the nature that's around them and protecting it, because they don't feel like they don't actually have a piece of it. And there's a lot of out-of-town landlords and things like that I think lend to that. Do you see any connection between this and home ownership?
So I wouldn't tie that to home ownership, but stability in a child's life is a piece of that, and so you can get stability in many ways that don't tie to home ownership. A lot of our families aren't capable. They don't have the resources to own a home. They don't have the permanency to own a home, and that's true regardless of your economic status or a lot of millennials right now, like a 30-year mortgage. Why would I want that? So you can be a renter. But if you don't know that you're going to have that same apartment a month from now or 2 months from now, in some of our schools, 60% plus of our kids start the school year one place and may transfer 3 or 4 times before the end of the school year. So it's hard to create a sense of ownership when you have that instability in their lives. And so whether it's through home ownership or through other programs, it's critically important that we do give kids a sense of that permanency, and then they can start to invest. They can start to invest in friendships. They can start to invest in out-of-school time programs. They can start to invest in their local surroundings.
Amy, one final question here.
Yeah, so there's an African-American environmental educator named Ron Robinson, who's really big in the birding world. And I heard him say a couple of years ago that when you do a really good job of bringing kids out to a place they're not familiar with in the natural world, and they have a positive experience, it's like lighting a candle. But that's just the start. The key is to keep the candle lit. Mm-hmm. So I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on how you would like to see that happening here in your work in this area? I mean, the kids come back from the Grand Tetons
Yeah.
with a really powerful experience, but then what?
Right. So I think that that's why Wilderness Inquiry becomes such an incredible partnership with us and a partner with us, because it is, to us, it's not just like we got 12 kids and we're putting them out. There's a pyramid of engagement that we have that starts off with, let's get 10,000. Mike Hom is so happy I used the pyramid of engagement. He's like, thank God he finally used that term. I've been trying to get him to use that term for 5 years. But get kids out on the river. Get them, one of the reasons we're pushing very, very hard to build an environmental learning center down at Crosby Park on the Mississippi River, because all of a sudden it's a place where people can have educational experiences, where they can get out on a canoe and connect, where we can do training programs, where we can do nature walks, where we can do all of those things, so that it's not, in any program that is effective. For out-of-school learning, whatever you're looking at in terms of helping our children succeed, it's the consistency and persistency of the dosage being applied. And giving a child a one giant pill that they got to choke down once does very, very little. But if you're consistently creating opportunities, whether it's through Frogtown Farms or whether through the Environmental Learning Center or partnerships with Wilderness Inquiries of the world, Boulder Options, et cetera, those things become incredibly important. And so we have to consistently apply dosage to our children in order to see a difference. And so whether that's continuing to keep the candle lit, and every camper will tell you the first and most important thing is get the fire lit. Keeping it lit keeps you warm through the night. That's an important thing that we do.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so for those I haven't met yet, Andy Moore with the National League of Cities Institute for Youth Education and Families, and it's so great to have 8 city teams gathered here, as well as esteemed national and regional faculty to support us in our thinking. One of the things I admire about Mayor Coleman is his gift for metaphor, and so I don't know if you knew that. I don't know if that's on your resume, but it should be. Yeah. Here's the image. One image I'm taking from the mayor's talk this morning. It's about the young man on the Highline Trail in Glacier National Park. Just as that young man forgot about the wire, that's what we want you to do here. Forget about the wire. See if you can pick up the challenge and the opportunity we're offering to think about hitching municipal leadership to all the great practice that you talked about last night. And the additional ideas you'll get infused with from your city peers and from the national faculty. And that's representative of this broader network that we have joined hands with through the Children of Nature Network. See if by suspending your disbelief and forgetting about the wire for the next 36 hours, just see where you get on behalf of your city. So that's really what our initiative is about, that connection between municipal leadership and the wonderful practices and creativity in the network. So look forward to a lot of good discussions about that. You'll see we have this trajectory in the agenda where you get ideas from national resource people this morning, both about what we're calling potential domains of activity, as well as about the essential challenge that our colleagues from Seattle really set out for us in terms of describing their practice last night about how do we engage more communities better as we're connecting kids to nature. So, and then we hear from some young people at lunchtime. We hear from a variety of program practices this afternoon. We give you a little bit of time to do some planning and processing within your city team and further processing opportunity on a walk to the Mississippi River. We can't get enough of the Mississippi River while we're here in St. Paul. And then tomorrow morning, more planning time together and setting off with some action steps. This, as you know, is the second of 2 leadership academies. So we chose these 16 cities that are at a variety of starting points for connecting children to nature. In a few weeks, we'll provide you a request for proposals that you can consider responding to as a city, and we're going to be funneling down to a smaller cohort of cities, probably only 6 that will receive planning grants early next year. 7 or 8 months of planning time, then a little bit more funneling down to 4 cities to receive implementation grants to put new ideas and practices and programs, policies into practice during the late 2016 through 2017. So that's what our support from the JPB Foundation enables us to do, and that's the process that we're launching here at the Leadership Academy.
One foundation for, here we go, a key foundation coming from the Institute for Good Education and Families, and several cities spoke about this last night, is the prior work our excellent colleagues Tracy Weed and Elena Hoffnagel have done at the Institute on active living and healthy eating. And I think it's fair to say that in several cities' cases, that's what inspired you to apply for this. So we have been thinking about the overlaps and distinctions between the active living, healthy eating movement embodied in less than cities, towns, and counties, et cetera, and the connecting kids to nature movement. So you see our early attempt to set out a very simple Venn diagram. We do think that there are critical overlaps in terms of vigorous outdoor play. Everybody's interested in less screen time across multiple settings, and quality family time. And then there are some different emphases in the 2 arenas. So I'm going to keep, I'm going to just lay that down as a foundation, encourage your interaction with our thinking around that. Speaking of that, one of the other foundational steps we took in this initiative is survey. We heard back from more than 100 communities across the country earlier this year about programs, practices, policy partnerships that you and other cities are undertaking to connect kids to nature. And that a brief summary of that survey result is in your packet. So this is a very preliminary document. We're going to be refining this, mining the survey results for more important nuggets. You all did a great job of laying a huge pile of nuggets on top of what's encapsulated here last night. But we're also interested in any feedback you may have about how we present this, and what's the best way to learn from the examples provided by the city. Peter, got a development question?
Just a comment about this, and I appreciate that. I think it's important to do that, and I am kind of the person that came to this from the blue, a little more on the blue side.
Yeah. How's it working for you?
Well, and I know Tracy, and I agree they're doing great stuff. We work with them. I think that one of the things that's just on those people working on the health and obesity kind of side of things, I think sometimes I realize we need to be thinking more about mental health, even in that broader context there, and about the connection. I mean, even setting aside the nature piece of things here, that within that work it's important to be talking about how that benefit mental health and thinking about how it's connected and not kind of separating it out too much even over there. And so hopefully that could be kind of more towards the middle, and if people are doing it well on the health and obesity side, I think. And then the other thing is just my hope is for the, people come at it from the side about wanting kids to be physically active and wanting for us, a lot has been talking about focus on our parks and what opportunities we have in those resources and how do we utilize that interest from people as a way to then make a case about why creating spaces in nature is important. And that's one way in, I think, to get people to understand the need to invest in our parks and to, I mean, in terms of what Richard was talking about yesterday about creating these spaces and stuff, that's one way to make it exciting and interesting for kids to want to go be.
Yeah, good points. And let me take just a page. I really appreciate you raising your hand. I'm interested in just popcorn thoughts from a couple of other people. So I'm going to take that to mean that, those are questions you're bringing to the academy here, Peter, and you'll be discussing with your team, with other people you meet here, and taking that back home. But what are some reasons other people came? Why were you motivated to come to the academy, and what do you hope to get out of your 2-day experience here? Just looking for a couple of popcorn reactions. What would represent a good outcome for you?
Some important coordinated strategies with different silos within our agency to tackle the issue. We're all doing it in our own cities, and then within our city, the school district, and our federal parks and our local park system. We all get it, but it's just figuring out how to kind of leverage each other's resources and the energy that we're spending together.
Yeah, nice. Steve, another thought?
Yeah, well, kind of the same thing. As I was sitting here talking, yes, I agree completely with that, but also I was just started making a list of the mayor has a diversity program, he has a ownership program, he has a strong neighborhood partnership program with over 100 neighborhood associations. I'm just seeing how I think this can be infused, really, and that's just off the top of my head, so I think how to infuse it across the city organization is really important.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
Just creating a goal. One of the things that was so impactful for me yesterday, just hearing the goal here in St. Paul, get 10,000 kids sponsored. Really simple. Get the message out, communicate it. So I want us to work on what's our goal. We have lots of different goals, and we have great organizations working together, we have great partnerships. But let's all get around one big goal that we think is important.
That's great. Thanks, Ricky. Yeah. Any other bubbling thoughts about what brings you here? What would be a good outcome for you?
I'm just going to
just
echoing what's been said. So the equity message that the mayor delivered is so important. Connecting the dots across our different departments and just really even breaking out of the silos, but just it still feels for me that it's this thing outside of as opposed to threading through. So that's what I really.
Sounds like you and Steve should talk. And Steve's very much you got the warp and woof, and you need to connect. Yeah. So so thanks everybody. Thanks for those who have spoken so far. We look forward to hearing from more folks. I want to be sure to welcome the Institute for Youth Education and Families Executive Director, Cliff Johnson, who came in from another visit to another city and joining us here for today and tomorrow as another support for this important new initiative. So with that, Margaret, I think I'll turn it over to you for the next phase of the discussion.
Okay, let's see our panel up here.